Okay, welcome to FinDepth. We are here. It's Ian Wharton and my buddy Oscar Hazel here with first of the season, I guess, now that we're into the preseason. It's good times. Football's back. Good times, I guess, as long as whatever team you're watching. So we're here for the Dolphins, of course. So thanks for joining. We might have some new people here today. A big influx of followers that came yesterday, so always appreciate that. So we're kind of talking about week 2, week 1, what we've seen. A lot of takeaways, even though we've only seen the first team offense for basically a quarter and 2 drives. And so we're going to start off with scheme, and then we're going to kind of get into offense, defense, and a little bit of those breaking news that's kind of happened just within the last few minutes of this starting. So Oscar, let's get into the scheme, offensive scheme with Bill Lazor. What have you noticed so far in the first 2 games? And it's been about 5 drives or so.
Well, I think we saw a bit less tempo than we did the week before, and that's going to be mainly down to just kind of not having 10 completions or 10 positive yards each time. And I think when you have a successful play, that breeds success for the next play. So I think we saw the tempo drop a little bit, but I think we're seeing a bit more motion. I think it's interesting when you see the play action. I think it's Pro Football Focus have Tannehill that's 34% of dropbacks, including play action, and kind of at that mesh point when he's handing off the ball, we're seeing that free defender that he's reading, and so that's one indication of one read we'll see him making. And we're also seeing generally it's either a player motioning around the back. It's been Brandon Gibson quite a lot, and that looks like that could be kind of a third option play. So I think that's quite an interesting, which we may see quite a bit of to kind of counteract a lack of run game that we saw. So I think if we can't run the ball between the tackles or in an outside zone, you have to counter that with some sort of short passing game that kind of gives your tackles and your quarterback kind of relief, because you can't have them dropping backs 3, 5, 7 steps drops every play and expecting them to not get sacked 100 times. And that was kind of the issue last year, is defenses can just blitz or they can just pressure and they don't need to respect anything. So I think we're going to see kind of it's similar to a triple option. We saw that kind of pass in the flat in the first week. We kind of see that's being set up in a different way, at least 3 or 4 times. I believe it was mainly Gibson around the back, and we saw kind of some screens in those bunch trips to the right, the drop Wallace made. So I think we're going to see a lot of lateral spread concepts. We're seeing a lot of, which is interesting. And I think Tannehill's still we saw kind of when he rolls out, they're trying to give multiple reads on levels. There was that one play where, but I think it was Sims motioned so it was a 2-back set. Sims motioned diagonally across the face of Tannehill, so changing the strong side of the play. And then they ran away from Sims, motioning play action, so the whole defense is going one way. Then Sims, the other tight end, the other side, I can't remember who tripped a bit coming off the engage, and then the far wide receiver will drag across at different levels. And I think it was Wallace going deep down the right. And so we're seeing kind of those vertical concepts where you're making kind of triangular reads in one place so you can have a quick progression. I think with play action we'll see that quite a bit. And so I think we're seeing more elements. I don't think we saw too much, but we're kind of seeing they're going to negate one area in which you kind of worry about the zone read is your quarterback being hit. And I think we're always seeing kind of a triple option or kind of a relief play to allow Tannehill not to get hit, whether that's a shuttle to the side or a pass in the flat, if he does make that reading correctly, as we'll see defenders become better at not crashing and not cutting off the quarterback, just staying pat and making the quarterback make a decision. And that's kind of what these kind of ends that are going to be that free end, that last perimeter defender that the quarterback's reading, they're going to be really strongly taught to not commit to either way and not give an easy read. So I think that's an interesting kind of wrinkle we're seeing, where it's a relief option if that defender isn't making an easy read. So I thought that's kind of the thing I picked up of. That's quite interesting, and I think we'll see that quite early on, and that gives kind of Tannehill a third area for the defense to respect, is that triple threat to the side. And we even saw that as a fake, the screen to Wallace that didn't work. He first pumped it to the other side before, so to get that kind of movement moving. I think there was also the screen to Miller where he was 10-yard gain was also pumped to that receiver going around the back. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if there was anything you kind of picked up, Ian, that caught your eye.
I mean, you pretty much nailed most of it. I was going to mention right there at the end, you mentioned the one where the receiver is in motion and he looked toward him. He was covered well, but then he went back to Miller. Miller was wide open, and I think, like you said, I think he got like an 8 to a 13-yard gain. It was somewhere in there. I think I saw Rashard Matthews do that same crossing motion in the backfield later in the game after Gibson had done it. I'm wondering if Mike Wallace is eventually going to be that guy, because we had heard about Mike Wallace being moved all over. Haven't really seen him move a ton at this point, but it's very vanilla. It's going to be very vanilla, and it should be very vanilla, especially playing the Patriots week 1. Of all teams, that's really the team that you don't want to see, or at least give too much to.
I think the motion of the tight ends was interesting. We even saw there'd be kind of 2 tight ends in line on one side, and they both motion to the other side, and kind of manipulating defenses so you're stressing which side is the strong side, trying to get a good matchup. I think that's kind of an interesting aspect to kind of run outside zone. Out of when we did that, we did then run back to the weak side. So that's kind of interesting kind of misdirection we're seeing a lot of, which is I think going to be a staple of this offense. It's all about getting an extra hat if you can, and then misdirection, spreading defenses, getting them running sideways. I think if you watch the Hard Knocks, you'd hear them talking about, I think it was the defensive line coach, it's like, they're making you run sideways, they're just going sideways, don't go sideways, go upfield, you want to penetrate. And so that's kind of what the offensive line and the scheme is trying to do, make defenses spread themselves, use effort to go sideways, and I think it was relatively effective in that kind of selling that misdirection.
Yeah, definitely, and I remember there was a trips formation that had started to go out to the left, and as soon as they were just outside the tackle box, Tannehill moved them over to the right. That kind of made me think, like you mentioned, the tight ends. On the second drive, they started using 12 personnel more, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends. I noticed it a couple times on that second drive. As opposed to the first, it was all 1 tight end, if that. And it made me think, watching a little bit of Chip Kelly's offense, there's situations where he'll put 2 tight ends as tackles on one side of the line, and then he'll move the tackle and the guard over to the right side of the line. So on the right side of the line, there'll be a huge power formation, and then he'll run like an inside zone, and then the running back just reads however the defense kind of adjusted to whatever side. And it's really interesting stuff like that I'm wondering if Lazer's going to pick up on and kind of replicate a little bit. Kind of mentioned how vanilla it was, but just seeing that stuff to start is really encouraging, because later in the game you come back to that stuff, and I realize most Dolphins fans haven't seen that in the last 2 years. Mike Sherman didn't do that stuff. He didn't call a play and then go back to it 2 quarters later just to run whatever the option was on that same play. So obviously, like the big play Saturday was the Jarvis Landry off the play action fake where he's right down the middle for a very easy gain. I mean, you could see the linebackers just freeze, and then the strong side linebacker actually started to rush for the running back. That stuff's going to happen more and more just because the threat of the run is that real, even if it's not effective. So then you go back to that play later. When you go back to it, that inside zone might actually be there because the linebackers are going to be running back a little bit. So it's just getting the defense thinking, and by thinking, it slows them down. Even just a second is going to make a big play, or at least make that much more of a crease to kind of work with. So I've been encouraged with this offense so far. It's at the very least it's the century, as opposed to Mike Sherman, who's I don't know what Mike Sherman runs really. It's just bland as bland. I mean, I think I've seen Pee Wee teams run as simple of an offense as that. So that was encouraging. So I mean, we kind of talked about scheme a little bit, and I think we'll start to transfer now into front seven of both sides, especially like the Dolphins O-line. A little bit ago, right before we started, Joe Philbin had just announced that he doesn't know which two guards are going to start, left guard and right guard. Shelley Smith took some first-team snaps today, which is definitely positive news. Dallas Thomas was on the second team, but Darren College was still on the first team as opposed to Billy Turner. So obviously last night I went through a lot of O-line stuff, kind of made my thoughts known that I think it should be Turner and Smith moving forward, at least to give them first team snaps. But what were your takeaways from the O-line Saturday night, and what did you really see?
Well, I think you have to start with Gerald McCoy as one of the best free techs in the league, and he was just completely dominant. And that first step quickness, just, I mean, not many players can deal with that, let alone a second year player playing first time of his life at right guard. So I have some sympathy. I think as scheme-wise, maybe they just weren't scheming towards Gerald McCoy, and that made it look worse. They weren't sending any double teams. I think the first time they sent a double team to him was on the strip sack, and that was after chipping, helping. There was the first play Shea was in. They slided towards the left first and then came back. So I think that maybe made it look worse than it could have been. It was just not scheming, a great defensive free tech, and this bringing that Tampa 2 back to that's what you want is disruptive interior tackle. So you kind of have to look at what you're facing, and that's where they're going to get pressure in that scheme. And we saw a lot of stunts, so that was interesting to kind of see. I think the communication between Dallas and James was actually really good in pass pro. They were quite good at moving, picking up stunts, swapping players, that communication as well. We didn't really see kind of any free man rushing. We saw quite a lot of last year where kind of both players take one player and the other guy's free because they haven't seen him or no one's taken responsibility for them. So we saw that. I think that's kind of promising that there's at least some sort of good communication and picking up. On the second level, I thought the landmarking was pretty bad. And just kind of like the angles they were taking, they didn't really get good. They didn't get in front of their guys. I know the kind of rules have changed on cut blocking, so whether that's kind of crossing their minds and they don't want to cut on the second, or they're not cutting, we're not seeing that, which is normally kind of a staple of a John Benton, Alex Gibbs offensive line, is cutting the backside, basically cutting anywhere. I've just been watching Coley, the University of Miami offensive coordinator, and they have awards for how many times you cut block, and that kind of just shows you kind of how some teams, they predicate their offense on cut blocking. So we haven't seen that. So whether that's due to they just don't want to get flagged for it, they don't know how hard it's going to be called. But I thought generally the second level play was pretty bad, just getting to their landmark. Whereas it was relatively good the first week. I thought it was a much poorer pass pro. I think it's fine. The tackles look good. I mean, Albert's a bit lazy at times, but he doesn't really need to. He's not trying to win a job. He's just there to not let Tannehill get killed, and he's not getting killed. So that's enough to earn his check for now. I thought when Shelley came back in, instantly kind of saw a little bit of push. When Billy came in, I think Billy Turner kind of makes Juwan James better in the run game, because the thing what Billy has and no one else does, and why I've kind of been very pro him being in the starting lineup, is he attacks players in the offensive line. The issue I have with Dallas in the run game is he's very passive. He's not attacking. He's kind of reacting to people. And when you're trying to run inside and you're trying to get up to the second level, you need to be aggressive. you need to get your hands on people early, and that's kind of an area I'm concerned. I think both of us have been pretty since basically after the draft, saying that we would have Shelley Smith at left guard and Billy somewhere, which would be right guard. I don't think there's anywhere. That would be kind of, I think we talked about since probably even before the draft, it would be ideal to draft Billy Turner and play him in that role. So I don't think we really need to go into that anymore. At least they are kind of experimenting with things. As Billy Turner in the third team went to left guard, so he got some reps of game time there as well. And they're at least they're kind of moving them around a lot. So it'll be interesting. I think there was that report saying that they wanted to have their offensive line set by now. I think that's just obvious. You want to have it set as early as before, but we're kind of not in that position. So we'll see kind of how it develops. I think we may just not be able to run very well against some teams, and that would be a shame. We heard news today that Pouncey is hoping to be back for week 4, so I might get to see him here in London. So that would be positive. I think he would allow you to potentially be a bit more aggressive in pass pro. You don't need to slide as much. You can keep you could keep Pouncey, say, on an island with someone, and you can be kind of content with that and slide someone to the tackle either way. So I think that kind of helps in pass pro a lot. Run game, I don't think it's going to be a huge difference with the guards, how they are. And I think this is partly down to the construction of the O-line, and particularly with the tackle that they chose. I like James, he's a really good pass protector, but most O-lines you build your blindside pass protection as a tackle, and you want to have a right tackle you can run behind, and we don't have that. So that's kind of the issue we have. We have plenty of left guards. We don't. You kind of have a weird mixture of players, and I think Billy Turner, Shelley Smith are both probably ideally suited for left guard. We don't really have anyone suited for right guard. With right guard, you want someone that can play on an island and pass protect and can get to the second level, has that athleticism. So I think Billy can do that. He's going to get beaten sometimes in pass protection. We saw that both games. He's got beaten outside by speed and a rip move. So I think he is going to struggle technique-wise with just being able to beat better players sometimes. But I think it's a work in progress. I think you just need to find a way to run, and there's all this talk about it's going to be a Chip Kelly offense. One thing Chip Kelly does is run the ball really effectively. So if you can't do that, it's not going to help. Maybe also Lamar Miller not getting that many carries could be an indication. I think running backs, you need to get in a rhythm, and but I think from what I saw, he made the right reads. They were declared well by the front. It was just the second level was just collapsing in and bringing the hole, so you can't really do much there. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of what you saw at the O-line.
Yeah, more of the same. I mean, like you said, pass pro, it is a funny configuration of linemen because they're all basically suited for the left side. Even Juwan James, I mean, people made the argument when he was at Tennessee that, he's a future left tackle, and I mean, you can see it. He's a very good pass pro guy. He's very refined already, has good anchor. He needs some work still, and that's going to continue being a rookie especially, and he's probably trying a little harder than some other people, especially starters, like Michael Johnson for Tampa Bay. I'm not saying he mailed it in, but, that's a guy that just got paid how many millions of dollars. A guy's not really fighting for a starting job, so we'll see how that plays out, but he's been very impressive so far. But like you said, against the run, it's really hard to run the ball when you've got Darren College, Samson Sattel, Dallas Thomas, and Juwan James in front of you. And really, Juwan James I shouldn't even put him in the category of those guys because he's not as bad as those three. They definitely prioritized pass protecting so far, and it's a little bit good news that they're going to be trying out Shelley Smith at guard. Like you said, we've been harping on that since we had first signed Shelley Smith and kind of got to the draft. That was really our ideal situation at O-line, and I think I've been very critical of Mike Pouncey, especially just looking at the money that he's going to be commanding. Um, but there's definitely no question that him returning will definitely help this team, not only as pass blocking, but certainly run blocking, because he's at least a capable run blocker. Can get push, move downfield, get to the second level, identify where the linebacker is, and at least put a hat on him. He's not great at sealing off, but he can at least get there, and that's something Samson Sattel, quite frankly, can't do. He doesn't even get off of his first level block, so
Yeah, they were mainly designing it so that Sattel would sit and they would let, because normally you would do it's based on hats, so whoever's the most over one's hat, you take half a guy each, and then the person outside goes up to wherever the linebacker is. That could be a reason why we kind of saw bad angles in the second level, as they didn't want him going up into the second level. They were kind of forcing angles and making it hard, but if you can't have someone that can do the job, they shouldn't. I mean, that's just maybe you need to replace them so you can have versatility across the line.
right. Yeah,
So
definitely.
should we go?
Go ahead.
Oh, you can.
Oh, I was just going to say, our buddy David Bolin actually sent us a question. It's probably a good time to answer it. Do you see us picking up any offensive guards after teams cut down? Kind of looking at the roster, I think the only guy that might make the roster that could be churned for a guard might be Jason Fox, depending on where he's at health-wise and kind of. I mean, this is a huge week for him, obviously, and a number of other guys. I'm not sure. Maybe you'd have. Do you have any guys in mind that might be cut? Maybe Green Bay or Philadelphia. I'm not too sure. I'm not too familiar with their.
Green Bay, you're not going to get anyone good. I guess Boone is going to be the guy. He might be. Apparently, he's being shopped for a fourth potentially, and then you pay him big. I mean, that could. I mean, I don't think they'll do that, but you never know. It all depends who gets cut. I mean, you can't really. It's hard enough to project the Dolphins who they're going to cut. I think what we kind of see is there's quite a lot of talent. It's just the talent is raw and it hasn't fully developed. And you're starting a lot of kind of when you want to develop talent is with established players around them in a system where there's kind of stability. So when you kind of have the position we're in, where we're having 5 new starters, there's no stability. There's both of the strengths are on the outside, and one of those is a rookie. It's hard to develop players in that environment. So I think we have the talent. It's just how quickly does it develop? And so I don't think you really. I mean, if we could find a good right guard or that could work, but I don't really see. I mean, O-line players and quality of O-line is pretty dire across the league, really. So
yeah,
I don't think there's going to be much chance. And then you've got teams like the Panthers, and who are going to be a more desirable landing spot for any free agent than the Miami of a battle, because you're going to win a job much easier in Carolina than you will here. I think Fox will be interesting. He played really well the last week for the Detroit Lions. The only week he played a full game, but the whole year he was injured. He only started the first and last game. So it kind of shows you kind of his main issue, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy through the camp period. So I think it'll be interesting. So do you think we're going to go with 8 or 9 offensive linemen as the final cut?
I think we'll probably see 9 just because Pouncey. What I've been working on today is looking at potential cuts, and I've been kind of reading some other people's projections, and I mean 9 makes a lot of sense. It probably just depends on Jason Fox, because if you're looking at 8 offensive linemen, you've got Pouncey that'll come back on the PUP. You've got Albert, James Smith, College, Brenner, Thomas, Turner, and Gardner. I think those guys are all safe. And then you just look at Jason Fox. I haven't seen any other lineman capable of making the roster outside of Fox. And he hasn't done. too great, apparently, from what people have said. So
I
if they
think it
want,
comes. Sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think it just comes down to who's the backup left tackle. If they have enough trust in Billy or Dallas to do that, then you don't need to keep Fox. If they don't envision either of those players, or whether it's James sliding over to the left and then you put in Dallas or Billy at right tackle, that maybe is another alternative. So if that's their plan, it's all about, we kind of need to know what their plan is in an emergency. If it's for Fox to be a swing tackle in an injury case, then I think it's a battle between Garner and Brenner, personally. I think one of those two won't make it. And perhaps that happens after, maybe we start with 9 with Pouncey and Pete not going on to PUP if he wants to be back for week 4, and then you kind of cut down once Pouncey's back to full health. So perhaps that will work out, and we'll see one less defensive back, tight ends, or wide receiver in the first couple of weeks. Shall we?
Yeah, I saw just real quick. I thought Garner had a really rough week last week too. Saturday, I mean, I saw him out of position multiple times. Wasn't really paying attention to him too much, but I feel like every time I saw him, he was just either out of position or getting kind of blown back. So, I mean, that'll be interesting to see if they do make that decision between those guys, between Garner and Fox. Kind of rooting for Fox, honestly.
Well, shall we move to the other side of the line? And I think the young kind of UDFAs have done really well on the defensive line. That's been kind of one of the promising things. Anthony Johnson's finally shown he can actually play football in spurts, which was kind of a big question mark. I know a lot of people kind of look at his athleticism, which is intriguing, and but he was one of the most disappointing players to watch in college last year. Kind of watching prospects, that whole defensive line was just misery. And then Garrison Smith looked really interesting as well as kind of a 0-1 tech option behind AJ Francis. And I think if AJ Francis can't go week 1, I think Smith, just as you need a second 0-1 tech for kind of the multiple looks, our base packages, our base defense is going to be, it looks like it contains a 0-1 tech most of the time. So I think he's kind of got a inside shot at being that kind of backup zero tech. I've been pretty impressed with his kind of gap integrity, and his hand use is nice, his pad level's good. And then I think we saw a bit more from Dion Jordan, Shelby, and those kind of, and OVE actually getting some edge pressure, and Dion Jordan, Wake getting real low and ripping. So I think they're kind of speeding up their run for quite a good quarter and a half. So I don't know if you want to kind of talk about anything that jumped out to you about the defensive line.
Yeah, I had a realization actually watching this morning. I kind of got saddened because I realized that this is probably the last year that we have Derek Shelby. Someone else will probably snatch him up as a starter, and I don't know. I've always been a fan of him as a rotational piece. But yeah, I thought overall the D-line has been pretty good. Wake really turned it on against Tampa Bay. Showed that explosion that you really wanted to see, and I didn't question that necessarily, but it's just good to see guys flash a little bit in preseason. You see a lot. I think you see a lot of guys coasting, and we don't really think much of it. Randy Starks has been pretty good. First 2 games, there have been some mention that he might be a little banged up, but you can't really tell when he's blowing through the line right off the snap. It'll be really interesting to see what they do at defensive tackle. Like you said, Garrison Smith's been a nice surprise. I thought he was going to be like a 5 tech whenever they do 34 looks, but he's been in right inside the middle layer, like Earl Mitchell's role almost with Houston, almost as like the nose tech or even as like the shade. That's been interesting to see. I mean, I thought he's been pretty good. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they do keep 5 defensive tackles. I think it's between him and Anthony Johnson. Especially with Francis possibly being out for a week or 2 of the regular season. I'm hoping they can sneak whichever one they don't keep on the practice squad. I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's been pretty encouraging up front. I thought this team really looks like a good unit. We know Jared Odrick's got the skills. hopefully, I don't think he'll be quite as relied upon, I should say, as last year, where he led the team in defensive line snaps, or at least defensive tackle snaps. I'm hoping that's not the case this year. Maybe they can cut those down a little bit with a little bit more depth. But overall, I thought it was a really good performance. And then obviously Terrence Feedy, he's a little bit banged up with a knee injury, but he still looked good. Deion Jordan looked pretty good. They gave him a lot of snaps last night. I didn't see the final snap total. I can see in like 2 seconds here. Looks like Deion Jordan got 23 snaps, but they went into the fourth quarter, so they gave him some extended time. Looking at his counterparts, he had more snaps than every defensive lineman except for Tevin Mims and Asako Ayatui. So it's good to see him getting that work. He needs the work. I thought he's played all right, though, when he's played.
The one thing is kind of being, he's not really, we saw maybe a bit more bend than we ever saw from him in that kind of where he pushed the left tackle into the quarterback, and then Fede recovered the fumble. I thought that was kind of the first time we saw some real bend, and I think that probably that got flagged as well for hands in the face because he was so low down. He was getting shoved in the face pretty badly. So I think that was nice to see kind of more bend and coming off the ball really quick as well. So that's kind of elements where he kind of flashes, and then if he can get that consistent, that's where he's going to be a dominant player. And I think the times we saw the biggest plays by the defensive ends on the quarterback, it was almost like a mirror. It was Wake and OV, and they were getting that same bend for Day and Jordan, and they were getting the same bend and pressure at the same time. And if you could kind of have that kind of pincer on the quarterback there to step up, and then you have the pocket collapsing from the interior as well, I think if we can keep getting that pressure with 4 up front, that's going to be a huge benefit to kind of how the rest of the team plays. We always talk about kind of, or we've been talking about with this offense, how you're trying to produce an extra hat offensively, so you have a running back that has no one assigned to him. You're taking one player out with that mesh point with the quarterback. In the same way as if you can rush 4 and get pressure, you're leaving an extra guy in the backfield to cover. And that's going to take less pressure off the linebackers and DBs in their roles. So we've got talking about linebackers. I know you've been looking at them this morning or during today. So maybe if you want to give any thoughts you thought about the linebackers, quite, I would say, improved play.
I thought they played a little bit better this week. You look at last week, Ellerby and Wheeler didn't really do too much. I didn't see a whole lot that was improved. I thought this week was a little bit better. Ellerby was starting to be a little bit more assertive when he attacks the running lanes. I thought he read plays a little bit better. Over at strong side, that should be expected, especially on like weak side runs. They ran a couple weak side runs, and he actually traveled laterally a little bit better than what I thought he would. Koamisi definitely had a nice game week 2. Talked about it week 1 a little bit, that he did a good job getting in position, but I don't know if it was nerves, I don't know if it was because it was the first game and they're not really used to hitting a lot, but he would either whiff on tackles or he would just over pursue. This week he did a little bit better at that, got into position, finished his tackles a little bit better. He's still a guy in coverage that you're just not really going to use very much, and what sucks about that is when you've got Misi out there, you're going to have Ellerby out there, because as bad as Ellerby is in coverage, I mean, Misi's not going to be any better. So Ellerby at least has the physical talent to kind of match up with slot receivers, although I hate when they do that. They're going to do it, so you just kind of have to analyze it. So Misi and Ellerby played a little bit better. Wheeler kind of did Wheeler things, and he creates pressure, but he just does things that really make you shake your head. I sent a picture out yesterday. He had a straight line at Josh McCown. I mean, looking dead in his eye. There's no way McCown's going to scramble around that. But he leaps at the last second. And as soon as he goes up off of his feet, McCown's able to just kind of escape a little bit. And it's just dumb plays like that. He did it a couple times last year. I think he even did it to Andrew Luck.
That was Dion Jordan that time, I think.
It might have been Deion Jordan. Yeah, I remember someone doing it to Andrew Luck, and I just remember
Yeah, it was
thinking,
Dion
that was
Jordan
a
that time.
dumb play.
I think it's reacting to the pump fake. They both bit on a pump fake, or so with the McCown it was pump fake. The result in the play didn't really change. He stopped the pass, so it was effective in pressurizing the quarterback, getting him out of the pocket. BA just wanted to see them finish that play. And if you can hit the quarterback, you should hit the quarterback, not try and bat a ball. I guess that's what he was trying to do. If you have the opportunity to hit. And if you go to
Sorry, I think what bothers me most about it is just like with him, it just seems like he's either he's not thinking about the game at all, and he's just being very undisciplined and reactive, or he is thinking about it and he's overthinking it. So I think that's what gets me with Wheeler, and it's frustrating with him is he just does these plays, and you're just like, are you even thinking or are you overthinking? It's just he's a strange player because if he's instinctive, I think he'd be better. I think he's overthinking things in his role, but it's so hard to tell. I mean, I can't even be sure about that.
And I mean, people just kind of now have got to the point where they just dismiss Wheeler as being trash, but I mean, he's the most athletic linebacker, and
he's a good pass rusher. He's been an effective pass rusher. He's not getting the sack, but it's kind of like Deion Jordan. The same thing's happening to Deion Jordan. I mean, they're getting there. They're creating pressure. They're forcing the quarterback to do something that, getting off of his base, moving around. Even if he does jump around, he at least move McCown off his base, put his eyes down, and do something else. So people kind of confuse that. Yeah, he had 1 or 2 sacks last year. Yes, that's true, but he also created pressure, I think, on 20% of something of his blitzes, which is one of the highest in the league. So I'm not saying he's an every down player because he's not, but he has a role. He can play a role effectively.
And as Josh Morris always says, disruption is production. And I think that was something a couple of weeks ago I was kind of showing all Olivia Vernon's sacks and showing how they were produced, and predominantly they were in nickel situations inside or cleaning up other people's disruption. And you need players you need finishers, but you also need that disruption. So I think situationally Wheeler has great value. You always want players that can rush the passer and be disruptive. It's just utilising him and not being dependent on him in coverage or against the run. In coverage, his upper body is too wide and he can't. It ruins any lower body agility he has. And I think you can't. There's some physical traits that you can't negate, and unfortunately, having a really large, broad upper body means you're not very good in coverage. So maybe if we go talk about, I think McCain McCann, how you want to say it, had a really good game, playing some nickel end as well, kind of back to his roots at Cal, kind of where he's predominantly an edge player. I think we still haven't really seen him in coverage, but that's more deep in coverage, and maybe you have to give some kind of props to coaching staff for letting him play in the roles in which he thrives and wins in. And Tripp has also been flat. I think he's just an instinctual player, and I think we could see him halfway through the year, if not earlier, playing that will linebacker position, as we've been saying since he was drafted. So I think that second team, I don't think Jenkins really can do much other than play in nickel package. That's his limitation for me, always will be. I think those other two, we're seeing kind of flashes of intriguing prospects, if not for some parts of this year, at least in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the backups were really interesting to watch. Like you said, McCain, they kind of moved him around. He lined up a little bit of strong side, a little bit on weak side, a little bit of defensive end. They're limiting, like you said, they're really limiting him in coverage, which is good. I think he's athletic. It's weird to see how beat reporters report on him. I've seen people say he's very athletic and stuff. And he didn't show super athleticism at Cal, because I went back and watched him. He looked like a physically somewhat limited player, but he's a good athlete. He's just not a great athlete. I mean, especially in the NFL, he's a somewhat very slightly above average athlete. So I like what they're doing with him. He's really attacking the line of scrimmage fantastically. I love that about him. The way he attacked on even play actions. Like there's some risk there, but you can put him in a different role where that's not going to bother the defense, especially on the weak side. That would be where you wanted him to do that, and then just clean up what happens in the run play if they do end up running a run play. Just really encouraging stuff. I mean, when he lined up at defensive end, he looked pretty good. A little bit more bend than what I thought he had. Again, though, just not a great athlete, but you can just do a lot of things with him, and I like players like that. And kind of how you said, Tripp might, work his way into the rotation. I think going back to Billy Turner, if Billy Turner doesn't start week 1, I would say the same about Jordan Tripp. Jordan Tripp doesn't start week 1, I wouldn't freak out, because I think after that bye week, that might be where some of these rookies, it starts to click a little bit, and they probably get on the field a little bit more. Especially early in the season, guys like Ellerby and Wheeler, those guys are going to really have to perform quickly. And if not, I wouldn't be surprised to see Misi either stay at middle linebacker or move to the strong side again, because we know he can do that job quite well. And then start to see guys like Tripp or even Trusnick. Trusnick's been playing really well, surprisingly, because that's really weird for a guy that late in his career to start playing that well. Or McCain. I think McCain probably gets on the field first of everybody that we've seen at linebacker, at least on like the backups.
And then maybe if we go into the secondary, we kind of saw, I think, Brent Grimes kind of not getting, I think it was 4 targets, 4 receptions, but what we did see in that game is not that many flags, and we've seen over the past couple of years that this Philbin does not like giving up flags, and potentially just the contact flagging that's been going on, or the pass interferences. Philbin put his foot down and said, "You're not going to touch guys," and that affects Grimes' game quite a lot. Even though his stature, he's a very physical player. So I think that kind of hindered Grimes a little bit, and obviously he's not fighting for a job, he's got nothing to earn. I think Will Davis, there was one play in particular in the third quarter that first time I've seen him really in control when his hips are flipped and his back's towards the ball, and he kind of closed off a wide receiver and didn't allow him to get anywhere near the ball. I think if he had a bit more awareness with his back turned, he may have been able to get a pick there, but I mean, this is kind of the time with rookie cornerbacks, you should never expect much in the first year. It's pretty much the hardest transition of all, and I think there's pretty much only Desmond Trufant was the only, and he is just a special player. He was the only to really shine. I thought he should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. He was just incredible. Oh, the Defensive Rookie of the Year anyway. So it's nice to see kind of Davis looking more comfortable with his hips turned, and he still has those same instincts when he can sit on his heels and read the quarterback, and then he kind of has similar attributes to Brent Grimes in that kind of attackive nature. It's really hard to kind of tell Jamal Taylor. There's one time when he got beat, but he was not being targeted at all. And so it's really hard to kind of, and especially without coaches going all 22, you can't really see what's happening on every play, just going off broadcast. So it'll be interesting to see if against the Cowboys, obviously going to throw a lot next week, whether we see Jamal get any more targets, which will be a pretty interesting game. And our offense, if it doesn't look good against the Cowboys, then we have some serious problems. If you can't run against them, you can't run against kindergarten kids. So I don't know if you want to bring up anything about the cornerbacks before we get into the safeties and then our practice squad predictions.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is on the Jamar Taylor deep ball, he was beaten, and I tried to go back a little bit and just see as much as possible from the broadcast angle, which isn't much. It did look like Jimmy Wilson jumped a little bit on that play action. Looked like he came up a little bit. And then you could see him running like hell to go back and cover that route. So Taylor might have thought that he had the safety deep to help out. But other than that, though, I haven't seen anything to be concerned about with Taylor. But it's hard to be confident in a player that you don't see that happen. Davis has been really interesting. I thought he's been very good. But like you said, we'll wait until bullets are actually in action and he's playing, first team corners. But so far it's been good. I mean, all you can really be is a little bit optimistic about it and just hope that it continues with him, because he's so boom or bust. If he can gain consistency, that's great. Um, he's a good fit for the scheme, even if he doesn't really turn his hips too well, and especially when he turns his ball or his back on the ball. There's definitely questions about that. I just don't, like you said, you just don't really see it much. So can he do it? It's one of those unknown things. So we'll see how it goes. But overall, I think the front four and then the back two, well, and then the back corners, whatever corners are playing, have actually done a really nice job.
And then we'll get to, I think, maybe an area where people haven't really been talking about much, but it's a bit of a concern for me anyways. Delmas looks really out of control, especially when flying into the box. Just looks like a rag doll, legs flying everywhere. And then Wilson's just hasn't had much discipline. His eyes are telling him the wrong things, and it's pretty worrying for the first 4 weeks when you're going to be playing Tom Brady and your safeties just don't look like NFL players right now.
Yeah, Delmas has definitely been a concern. We had kind of said as soon as he was signed that, um, this is a boomer bust player. He's not Chris Clemens. Chris Clemens is going to make the safe play. He's going to prevent that big play from happening, but he's also going to, he's not really going to create too much for you either. And there's definitely negatives to that as well. But Delmas is the opposite, and so far the early returns have been a little scary. Like you say, he's kind of like he's like a mixture of Brandon Merriweather, and when he's playing well, he's more like Bob Sanders, someone like that. So we haven't seen the Bob Sanders side yet. I thought he played all right week one. Not great, not really good, but I thought he was, okay. I can see where if that pays off, like if that risk that he takes works, that's going to be a really nice play. I mean, I think he almost had a pick six the first game, or at least an interception. And then game two, this week was rough. This week was really poor, just flying all over and just not using fundamentals at all. And it was only accentuated by the fact that Wilson looks so out of place at safety. He has the ability there, but I mean he's a slot cornerback. There's a reason why I've been talking a lot about him at slot cornerback, and as soon as the Rashad Jones news came out that he was suspended, I didn't sugarcoat it that's a major loss for the team. As poorly as he's played some weeks, it's tough to put Jimmy Wilson back there. The guy just hasn't played much, and like you said, you're facing Tom Brady week one. I mean, good luck, kid. And when Jones gets back, it'll help a little bit, and then you have to worry about some other things. But Wilson, at least, I mean, Wilson's not even tackling. And that's the problem too. Is it's one thing if he's out of position coverage wise, that's sort of to be expected, especially early on. But if you have two safeties that can't tackle, that's a scary thought.
And I think maybe now we're talking about safeties. I think this was one area in which last year, particularly with kind of Jamal Taylor being hurt quite a bit or almost going on IR, and Davis not really seeing, we saw a lot of DBs being on the kind of tail end of the depth chart. So maybe we'll talk about kind of special teams, and I think we've seen relatively good play on special teams from a coverage standpoint, it was pretty bad last year at times. But I think it's been interesting to see Landry on quite a lot of kick returns and having the more flashy plays on kick return or punt returns. And I think during kind of camp and OTAs, we never really couldn't really see if there was going to be a competition for Thigpen in that role. And think this could be this is where kind of jobs are won and lost. And if Landry can win that kicks returning job, it kind of opens a place for whether you want to have a fourth or fifth tight end even, or an extra offensive lineman keeping Pouncey around, not on PP, or if you want to have another defensive tackle, another defensive end. So I think that's going to be kind of an interesting bubble player. And then kind of what's happening with those last safeties with Don Jones, Michael Thomas, Kovacs, and kind of those kind of safe, and even the latter linebackers of Freeney and Trosnick. Kind of those are going to be the players on the bubble, we kind of know they're going to work themselves up pretty easily. But then the practice squad, I think, is another interesting area. I think Gator Hopkins should make it. I think he's been injured, put nothing on tape yet. We may see the end of the Cowboys game. He might get a snap or two, and then week 4 he may play. So I think he should make it pretty comfortably because he's just a real talented player. His upside is a Charles Clay-like player, and if you can groom that talent behind a veteran, that gives you really good not only roster structure, but also kind of ability to test things without wearing out a player. And I think that's always a really good thing for kind of roster management. And then I think we've already talked about the 2 defensive tackles. I think will make it. Is there anyone else that kind of jumps out at you as being worthy of making the practice squad?
I was disappointed that Tevin Mims kind of stepped back week 2. What's the limit on practice squad? Isn't it like 9 or something like that? 8. Okay, yeah, then he wasn't going to make it anyways then. I haven't seen anyone in the backup secondary that's really done too well. Guys like Demetrius Wright, Kevin Fogg, I think those guys will just be churned. I'm not sure if they'll really be needed to be brought back. Offensively, Matt Hazel, I'm sure will go on practice squad. We haven't seen too much of him. I think he's played 18 snaps last game, but I mean it's hard to look good out there with Brady Quinn. So I feel like with guys like Hazel, even Arthur Lynch, who it sounds like he might have been hurt for the first couple weeks. I feel like they're kind of protecting some of these rookies, and Gator Hoskins. I mean, I don't know this for sure. Anything. I'm just kind of speculating that you almost wonder if they're just kind of holding him out just to keep him and sneak him on the practice squad. They've hit on a couple of undrafted free agents. Those signings, like we talked about, Garrison Smith, Anthony Johnson, Gator Hoskins, like they're hitting on these guys. So people might be kind of scared off by the day 3 picks not working out yet. Like I said, Lynch and Hazel, they haven't worked out yet. But if they can hit on 2 or 3 undrafted free agents, that's incredible. So it'll be interesting to see
one of those running backs, whether it's Damian Williams or Pauline Starker. I think whoever doesn't make the 53 out of those 2 we see in the practice squad. So I think there's some talent that's not going to make the 53, and that's kind of promising for this first Hickey class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if there's. Yeah, I think that's kind of. We haven't really got to see much of the depth at defensive back, and so partly because we kind of have those 2 young corners that you want to kind of get work, but it seems like it's a very versatile group. I mean, in a pinch, I reckon you can play Finnegan at safety. He did it before in college. He played there at Samford. So kind of Wilson can maybe play safety, can play nickel corner. Both Jamar and Will Davis getting turns at nickel. Walt Akins is being played both at safety and corner. So we kind of have a more versatile group where you don't need to have 12, 13 guys. Michael Thomas I see him as a safety, and he's famously played corner for 12 snaps and became AFC Player of the Week, 12 snaps. So he has that kind of versatility when you're playing with 6, 7 DBs. You can put him out there in man-to-man situations, and we've seen some upside. I know San Francisco were pretty pissed to have him taken off their practice squad. So we've got some kind of versatility. The offensive line, I don't know if we haven't seen really anything of Tyler Larson, although it was hyped up, but I think he's just not a scheme fit. But perhaps he makes it as just, you want to have, because when you're constructing a practice squad, it's also part about being a scout team. So you want to have some kind of power players so you can give those looks to your defensive linemen. So perhaps that will be, we'll see him or maybe Arkin, who's kind of flashed a little bit. Maybe they make the practice squad. But I think there'll be 3 or 4 really talented players on the practice squad at least. And have you got any kind of ideas of surprise players that are going to make the 53, whether it'll be only 2 quarterbacks, more tight ends than we've seen before, more wide receivers than we've seen before?
I think we stick with the two quarterbacks, Tannehill and Moore. I'm glad that Matt Moore kind of shut everybody up about Brady Quinn. He played all right. He didn't play great, but he played all right. Played good enough. The stat sheets definitely look a lot better than how he played, but he played good enough, especially for a backup. Tight end, I think they'll carry all four. Clay, Sims, Agnew, and Lynch. If anyone gets cut, I think it's Agnew at this point. It's not, like I said, it sounds like Lynch is coming back from injury. We know Clay is coming back from injury. He practiced today, which is great. I didn't think it was too serious. I think people just kind of got scared because no one really knew what was going on. But I think they'll carry four, and then I think week 4. I think week 4, when everyone comes back, for week 5, whenever everyone gets back from their suspension, and then the PUP list, I think you'll kind of see, you might see a purging of some of these guys, whether it be Nate Garner or Jason Fox or Michael Agnew or Arthur Lynch, because Lynch could actually go to the practice squad as well. And then I think at wide receiver, I think we see Damian Williams with an AN. I think he makes it over Armand Binns because of his return abilities, and he's the only other receiver that's kind of similar to Mike Wallace. He's kind of like a junior Mike Wallace. Everyone else is kind of like the same mold and same skill sets. And then running back, I think Damian with an EN makes it over Daniel Thomas, and then Mike Gillisley, I think, makes the roster too. So 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 4 tight ends, maybe. Maybe that's not possible, but just kind
I think it is. I think that fits the Green Bay model. They'll have 4 tight ends and a fullback, and I think when you have players like Agnew that's shown he can play, and we've seen Clay Sims lining up as a fullback as well a bit. Kind of, he's obviously been pushed into that role with the lack of tight ends we've kind of had. You obviously don't need that lead blocker because you're not using him that much, but you can get that work out of the tight end, and that kind of gives you that extra roster position. If you don't have Thigpen, you have that in the wide receiver core, then you can kind of have another wide receiver. I'm not sure if we see either Damien Williams. I think Orlean Starker might make it, although he's been getting less work. I think I prefer his vision. I think he has less kind of off the field concerns. I think there's similar talent. I think, but Darker, I just think I prefer his vision, and I think he maybe is a tick slower, but he's still got really good burst, one cut, a very similar mold to Miller, I think, type of player. Although I wouldn't be minded either, but I think the wide receiver Damien Williams, I thought he hasn't really shown anything in games. I know he's flashed a bit in camp, but I haven't really been that impressed with him. I think Matthews has been really impressed. I think he's been the same. Gibson's at the same both, and Landry. I think those 3 players are going to be quite big, and if we can even have some empty sets of 5 wide receivers, I think that could be a really interesting package with those 5 guys out there. So I think the wide receiver core, even though it still consists of Mike Wallace, who I think I described as having a catching radius of a limbless otter yesterday, that's going to be a bit of a issue, but you're not going to get rid of him, and you can use him schematically to stretch the field vertically, and that's never a bad thing. I think Hartline needs to remember how to catch. I think him and Wallace it happened at the end of last year, and it's a big contribution to why we didn't win the Bills game or the Jets game, is big drops on 3rd down and just not concentrating, not doing the fundamentals right. And when you have your veterans not doing the fundamentals, your paid up players executing fundamental football, that's always a very irritating thing for fans, coaches, and it's not a very good example for the rest of the players. And I think I've talked about this before on kind of previous shows. Teams often have 1 room or 2 rooms that constantly you see a turnover of talent, and part of that is the veteran leadership and the players teaching the new players the standard of which to play at. And I don't think it's any surprise that we have 5 really talented defensive ends and Cameron Wake there, who was in a room with Jason Taylor. and you see this talent go down, whereas the offensive line hasn't had a huge amount of talent in there. We've had one or two good players, and it played well when we had the likes of Jake Long, who's naturally incredible player, and we haven't had our secondary. We've been pretty lucky to kind of inherit Brent Grimes and kind of him bring a kind of a veteran or kind of a way of playing, and that seems to have kind of rubbed off on that secondary. And so I think that's kind of, we haven't had a good wide receiving core for a very long time. The fact that Mike Wallace Brian Hartline is the first receiver, and I think is he going to be the first receiver ever to have a chance to have 3 1,000-yard years in a row?
Duper and Clayton might have done it, but I'm not sure.
Or maybe since the Dan Marino era, but that's still...
It's been a while.
I mean, talent grows each other, and so I think when you're having someone making the most money on the team and they can't make a catch because someone's pulling their shirt or whatever, that doesn't
That's
breed
crazy.
competitiveness. That doesn't breed kind of anyone else wanting to try, because there's no tone being set. So that's kind of my final happy thought on week 2. So I don't know if you want to kind of finish off anything. Maybe we should talk about the Cowboys game coming up quickly before we finish.
Yeah, by the way, Hartline will be the first Dolphins receiver to ever accomplish that. 3-1K in a row. But Cowboys game, I'm just looking to see, more O-line reps. I want to see who's getting those first team reps and how they're playing. This is really the last game that counts. Week 4 is not going to probably weigh very heavily. We're going to see a lot of the guys that are going to be churned. This is it. This is a good test. This is a playoff caliber team that we're facing. Dallas isn't a high quality playoff caliber team, but as far as what they bring to the table, their offensive weaponry is excellent. Their offensive line is now very good. The defense is going to be up for a challenge, and hopefully, I'm just hoping the linebackers play better. Someone needs to step up. I think we saw a little bit of that. I harped on that last week. Someone needs to step up this week. I think we saw that a little bit. Can someone do it again now? Because that consistency is what's going to get these guys to overtake the starters. So just want to see a little bit more consistency. I'm not too worried about the cornerbacks. Safeties, I'd like to see more consistency and actually be in position. But yeah, it's just another week. And can't overreact either way over it. It's preseason. Schemes are vanilla, and guys are kind of just freewheeling it sometimes. So try not to read too much into it. But I just want to see I really want to see the offensive line. I really want to see Billy Turner get in there and just continue to maul people and just shove them 20 yards down the field. That was fantastic.
I think if we don't see the offense, we're playing probably the worst defense in the league next week. So if we're not seeing a run game, if we're not seeing kind of execution one-on-one, I can't stress how bad this defense is. There's maybe Henry Melton, who's coming off an ACL, or is he? Is there anyone else?
DeMarcus Lawrence is hurt, so I don't think so.
That's the whole.
That's
it's
crazy.
Literally just a wrecking ball. So in one side, if we play badly, that's awful. If we play really well, it really doesn't mean anything. But you kind of want to see at least the offensive linemen getting to the second level, understanding angles, understanding their leverage in the run game. And I think if we see that, I'll be happy enough. Defensively, it'll be a really good challenge. Good offensive line, good quarterback potentially playing. I think Romo's still kind of struggling with his deep ball. He'll be able to manipulate safeties a bit, so we can see how they kind of react, although we won't be able to see too much on broadcast. And obviously, their firepower on the outside, and Witten, I think we haven't really seen many tight ends really attack us. Obviously, Austin Sperry and Jenkins completely obliterated Jimmy Wilson, but we haven't really seen linebacker on tight end yet, which is Or I think Dion Jordan was when he kind of got jammed off the line and just missed a step and got beat. So we haven't really seen that much, which has been kind of an issue. Although it's sounding like Jimmy Graham's going to be 50-50 week 1, so that could be a turn in Dolphins' favour in that kind of element. But yeah, I think it's going to be more the defense is playing a really good offense, a top 5 offense, that our offense is playing. It could be just like cats in a bag. They're really, like, if we don't score 20 points in the first quarter, well, I mean, that's obviously no exaggeration, but if you're not executing against very bad players, it's like playing the second or third string defense. So that's, you want to see execution, and I think it'll be worrisome if we can't run against that Dallas team. Well, anyway, I think it's just been over an hour, and so I think we'll see some more content on the website as kind of these weeks go on. We're trying to get a couple of pieces out for each game and leading up to each one. So make sure you check out the site every once in a while and follow Ian. He says good shit all the time. And so unless you want to say anything, farewells. Happy birthday to Brad if you're watching.
Happy birthday, yes.
You're running everyone's avatars at the moment.
I get so confused seeing everybody because everyone has the same layout and it's just a different player. I'm like, I feel like everyone's talking to themselves. But they are fantastic, though. They are wonderful. Got it on my phone, too. So
yes, it's good. Or even the what was it? AJ Francis even requested his own one and stuff. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that's a good early birthday present for Brad, and I guess we'll do another one of these after Cowboys, and hopefully we'll have a pitch just before the first cuts, and we'll have a pretty firm picture of who the starting 11 on both sides of the ball will be. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.